Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I've got an amazing story to share with you. A story about a shepherd who left everything behind and ended up walking among the stars, fighting galactic wars, and planting peace across the universe. Stay tuned, because you won't want to miss a single moment of this adventure. Mike had always felt like he didn't belong. Not in the cities, not among the crowds, not in a world drowning in noise, war, and blinking screens. He was young, barely 22, but his heart beat to an older rhythm. While others chased trends and technology, Mike dreamed of silence, of stars, of a life untouched by machines. So he left. He sold his phone, deleted his accounts, packed a canvas bag, and walked away from everything. With him were only his loyal sheepdog, Rex, and a flock of 30 sheep. No destination, no map, just the desert. The desert was vast and merciless. Days scorched his skin, nights froze his bones. But Mike felt alive. Each morning he rose with the sun, guided his sheep across the dunes, and let the wind decide his path. He spoke only to Rex. He slept under the stars. He cooked over fire. He was free. Weeks passed, then months. Mike grew lean and strong. His beard thickened, his eyes sharpened. He learned to read the land, the way the sand shifted, the way the wind whispered. He became part of the desert, until the day he saw the pyramid. It shimmered in the distance, nestled between two jagged cliffs. Small, no taller than a man, and made entirely of glass. It pulsed faintly with a soft blue light, as if it were breathing. The air around it shimmered, not with heat, but with something else. Something alive. Mike climbed the ridge, Rex at his side, ears pinned back. The sheep stopped, uneasy.
What the hell is that?
When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the desert. He stood in a city unlike anything he had ever imagined. Towering buildings stretched into the clouds, their surfaces shimmering like liquid metal. The sky was a soft violet, and strange aircraft, shaped like flying saucers, zipped silently overhead. There were no trees, no sand, no sheep, and no Rex.
Rex, where are you?
Then he saw them, short, pale blue humanoids with glowing eyes surrounding him. He tried to run, but the ground shifted, slick and frictionless, and he slipped. They didn't speak or shout. They simply lifted him and carried him inside. Inside, everything was white and cold. Machines began scanning him.
He screamed.
Days blurred into endless light. They tested him, scanned him, and showed visions through images. The pyramid, it turned out, was a trap, a device created by the Zinari to capture beings across the galaxy.
My name is Vex, you are different.
Different how? You adapt, you resist, you think.
We found your planet, we can send you back, but we need you. The final battle is near, I'll fight, then I'll go home.
The Corps attacked with everything they had, thousands of ships, millions of soldiers. The Zinari were outnumbered, but they had Mike. He led the charge, flying through enemy lines, destroying command centers, rallying troops. His suit was damaged, his body was bruised, but he didn't stop. Not until the Corps leader, General Varn, was defeated. Peace was declared. The galaxy breathed again. Mike returned to Earth. But he didn't go back to the desert. He built a new home, half Zinari, half human, a place of learning, of peace, of unity. He became a legend, the shepherd who walked among stars, the boy who became a warrior, the man who brought peace. And somewhere, in a quiet valley, Rex waited. Mike returned to him one final time. Together, they watched the stars. He had walked among them. He had fought for them. He had loved them. And now he watched them. He had walked among them. He had fought for them. He had loved them. And now he watched them. But the stars were not done with Mike. One quiet evening, as he sat beside Rex watching the sky, a familiar shimmer appeared on the horizon. It was faint, almost invisible, but Mike knew that glow. The pyramid. Another one, or perhaps the same. He stood slowly, heart pounding, and walked toward it. Rex followed, silent.
You are needed once more.
Ready for one more journey? Rex barks once.
You have crossed into the Nexus. You are the fulcrum, the balance between chaos and order. You must choose.
You've done it. Vex. No, we've done it. Mike. You've awakened the elders. Vex. That's good, right? Mike. It means the galaxy is ready to become one. Elder. You are the bridge. Will you walk with us? Elder.
This is the Axis tree. It connects all worlds, all timelines, all possibilities. Elder.
He saw himself as a boy, chasing sheep through green fields. He saw himself in the desert, alone and free. He saw himself in battle, leading fleets, saving lives. He saw versions of himself that never left home, versions that died young, versions that became tyrants, versions that never existed. And then he saw the future, a galaxy united, a council of worlds, a peace forged not by power, but by understanding. And at the center of it all, him, not as a warrior, not as a shepherd, but as a guide.
You have walked the path. Now you must plant the seed.
He turned, walked to the edge of the cradle, and stepped through the veil. He emerged on a barren world, gray, lifeless, forgotten. The sky was dark, the ground cracked. But Mike knelt, dug into the soil, and planted the seed. The ground trembled. Light spread. The seed took root, and from it grew a new tree, smaller, younger, but alive. Its light pushed back the darkness. Flowers bloomed. Water flowed. Air shimmered with warmth. Life returned. And with it, hope.
It begins.
The world Mike had awakened was no longer barren. The tree he had planted pulsed with life, and from its roots, the planet began to heal. The soil softened, the air warmed. Creatures emerged, some familiar, some entirely new, drawn by the energy of rebirth. Mike walked among them, not as a ruler, but as a witness. He didn't give orders. He didn't build empires. He simply listened, guided, and protected. The elders watched from afar, their presence felt, but rarely seen. They had passed the torch, and Mike had accepted it. Rex, ever loyal, became more than a companion. The Nexus had touched him too. He understood languages now, responded to thoughts, and could sense danger before it arrived. Together they became guardians of the new world, a place where beings from across the galaxy could come not to conquer, but to coexist. Word spread. Ships arrived. First the Zenari, then the Core, now changed, humbled by defeat and seeking redemption. Then others, crystalline beings from the edge of the void, sentient clouds from gas giants, even humans who had followed the legends of the Shepherd of Stars. They built a city, not of steel, but of light and harmony. No walls, no weapons, just open halls, gardens, and towers that sang with the wind. They called it Solara. Mike lived in a modest home at its edge, surrounded by wildflowers and the soft bleating of sheep. Yes, he had found them again. Or perhaps they had found him, a new flock, born of the old, grazing peacefully under twin suns. And every evening, as the stars blinked awake, Mike sat with Rex beneath the Axis tree, watching the sky. He had walked among stars. He had fought for peace. He had planted hope. And now, he watched it grow. The tree continued to grow, its branches reaching toward the stars, its roots anchoring the planet in harmony. Creatures from distant worlds came to rest beneath its shade, drawn by the quiet power it radiated. Some came seeking wisdom, others came seeking healing. All left changed. Mike walked among them, no longer a stranger to the galaxy, but a part of it. He spoke little, but his presence was enough. The stories of his journey, of the desert, the pyramid, the war, and the peace, spread like wildfire. Children learned his name before they learned to speak. Elders whispered his tale as prophecy. But Mike didn't seek worship. He spent his days tending the land, guiding those who arrived, and watching the stars. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, a ripple passed through the sky. A new pyramid appeared, this one larger, more intricate, its surface etched with symbols from 1,000 worlds. Mike approached it slowly. It pulsed once, then opened. Inside was not a trap, but a message, a call, a warning.
Will you stand with me?
The shepherd had become a gardener. Now he would become a guardian, and the stars would remember. Solara thrived. The city expanded, not upward, but outward, organically, harmoniously. Structures grew from the ground like coral, shaped by the thoughts and dreams of those who lived there. There were no rulers, no borders, no currency. Knowledge was the only wealth, and kindness the only law. Mike walked its paths daily, greeting travelers from galaxies he had never heard of. Some came in ships the size of mountains. Others arrived through portals woven from light. All came with stories, all left with hope.
But even in peace, the universe stirred. One night, as Mike sat beneath the axis tree, a shadow passed across the stars. The elders returned. Their forms were dimmer now, their voices slower. "The balance is shifting," they said. "A force beyond time awakens." Mike stood. "What do you need?" "Not war," they said. "Wisdom."
And so, Mike journeyed again, not with weapons, but with questions. He traveled to the edge of the known universe, to places where light had never touched. He spoke to beings made of gravity, to minds that lived in black holes, to civilizations that remembered the birth of stars. He listened, he learned, and he returned, with knowledge that bent reality, with truths that healed wounds deeper than war. He shared them freely, planting seeds of understanding across worlds. The shadow faded, balance returned, and Mike, the shepherd, the warrior, the gardener, the guardian, became something more. He became legend, not in statues, not in songs, but in the way stars whispered his name when they blinked, and in the way every traveler, lost and afraid, found their way to Solara and found peace. And so, the legend of Mike continued, not as a tale of war, but as a living story of unity. The tree he had planted on the once-dead world grew taller than any structure ever built. Its branches stretched into the sky, and its roots reached deep into the planet's soul. From it, new life emerged, flora that glowed with memory, fauna that sang in harmony, and air that carried the scent of peace. Solara became the heart of the galaxy, not a capital, not a throne, a sanctuary. Leaders came not to rule, but to listen. Scientists came not to conquer nature, but to learn from it. Artists came to paint with light, musicians to compose with gravity, and philosophers to sit beneath the axis tree and ask questions that had no answers.
Mike remained at the center of it all. He aged, slowly, touched by the Nexus's gift. His hair turned silver, his steps grew softer, but his spirit never dimmed. He still walked the fields with Rex, still greeted every traveler with a smile, still sat beneath the stars each night and whispered thanks. One day, a child from a distant world asked him, "Are you the king of Solara?" Mike chuckled, kneeling beside her. "No," he said. "I'm just the shepherd." And that was enough.
Because in a galaxy once torn by war, it was the shepherd who had shown the way, not with power, not with fear, but with kindness. And the stars, ever watchful, blinked in quiet joy. And so, Solara stood not just as a city, but as a living testament to what the galaxy could become when fear was replaced by understanding. The axis tree continued to grow, its branches now visible from orbit, glowing like a constellation rooted in soil. Pilgrims arrived daily, not to worship, but to learn. They came from ice worlds, lava moons, floating cities, and subterranean realms, each bringing their own stories, their own hopes. Mike welcomed them all. He had become more than a man, not in power, not in immortality, but in presence. His name was spoken with reverence, not because he demanded it, but because he had earned it. He had walked through fire, through silence, through stars, and returned with peace in his hands.
Is it true that you were once just a shepherd? I still am. But you saved the galaxy. I didn't save it. I reminded it how to grow. Will you teach me?
And so, the story continued, not in battles, but in seeds planted, in minds opened, in hearts healed. The galaxy didn't need heroes anymore. It needed gardeners. And Mike, the shepherd of stars, had become the first. And the stars continued to whisper. Years passed, and Solara became more than a sanctuary. It became a seedbed for civilizations reborn. The teachings of the shepherd spread far beyond the axis tree, carried by travelers who had once arrived lost and left enlightened. New worlds adopted the principles of harmony and growth. Conflicts faded. Borders dissolved. The galaxy, once fractured by fear, began to pulse with unity. Mike, now older and quieter, spent his days walking the gardens that had replaced the old landing fields. Flowers from 100 planets bloomed side by side. Trees sang in languages only the wind understood. Children played among glowing stones that remembered laughter. Rex, his fur now streaked with silver, still trotted beside him, ever watchful. One morning, as the twin suns rose in perfect alignment, a ripple passed through the axis tree. Its leaves shimmered like liquid starlight, casting waves of color across the sky. The axis tree was responding, not to danger, but to a presence. Something, or someone, was approaching. Mike stood, his joints slower now, but his gaze still sharp. Rex rose beside him, ears perked, sensing the shift in the air. From the horizon, a figure emerged. Not in a ship, not through a portal, but walking, step by step, across the field of blooming light. It was a child, not human, not Zenari, something new. Her skin glowed faintly like moonlight on water. Her eyes held galaxies, and in her hand, she carried a seed.
Mike watched her approach, heart quiet. I found this, she said, her voice like wind through leaves. It called me. Mike knelt, taking the seed gently. It pulsed once in his palm. He looked at the child. Do you know what it is? She nodded. It's the beginning. Mike smiled. Yes, he said. It is.
And together, they walked to the edge of the garden, where the soil was untouched, waiting. Mike dug with his hands, slow and careful. The child placed the seed. Rex barked once, softly. The ground shimmered. A sprout emerged. Not just a tree, but a new axis, a new path, a new story. Mike sat back, watching it grow. He had planted peace. Now, he had planted legacy. And the stars, ever faithful, blinked in quiet celebration. The axis tree's shimmer grew brighter, casting long shadows that danced across the fields of Solara. The sprout planted by the child began to pulse in rhythm with the original tree, as if the two were speaking across generations. Mike watched in silence, his heart full, not with pride, but with peace. Visitors gathered, sensing something sacred unfolding. They didn't speak, they didn't interrupt. They simply stood in quiet reverence as the new tree grew faster than nature should allow, its trunk spiraling upward, its leaves unfolding like wings. Rex sat beside Mike, his gaze fixed on the horizon. From the sky, a ribbon of light descended, slow, deliberate, and woven with colors no eye had seen before. It touched the tip of the new tree, and in that moment, every being in Solara felt it. A memory, not of the past, but of the future, a glimpse of what could be, if they continued to choose understanding over fear, growth over conquest, unity over division. Mike closed his eyes. He saw worlds blooming. He saw children from every species playing together beneath trees that sang. He saw stars guiding travelers not to war, but to wonder. And he saw himself, older, quieter, fading into the soil, becoming part of the roots. He opened his eyes. "You'll take care of it?" he asked. "I'll listen to it, like you did." Then, for the first time in years, he stood without effort. the Nexus pulsed gently within him, lifting the weight of time. He walked to the tree, placed his hand on its bark, and whispered something only it could hear. And Mike vanished, not in death, but in transformation. He became part of the light, part of the story, part of the stars.
And Solara, the city of peace, continued to grow, guided by the memory of a shepherd who had once walked alone in the desert, searching for silence, and instead found the voice of the universe. He never left.
Sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn, travelers claim to see a figure walking the fields, a man with silver hair and a dog with stars in his eyes. They would vanish before anyone could speak to them, but the grass would be warm where they had stood, and the flowers would bloom brighter in their wake. The galaxy changed. Not all at once. Not without struggle. But the seeds Mike had planted, of kindness, of courage, of connection, took root in places he had never seen. New Solara-like sanctuaries bloomed on distant moons. Axis trees grew in the hearts of asteroid cities, and the pyramids, once feared as traps, became gateways of learning and unity. The stars no longer whispered his name. They sang it. And in every corner of the cosmos, when a child looked up at the night sky and asked, "Who will guide us?" the answer came not from a throne or a weapon, but from the wind in the trees, the warmth of the soil, and the light in their own hearts. The shepherd had shown them the way, and now they walked it together. And the path they walked together became a way of life. Generations passed, and the story of Mike was no longer just a tale, it was a foundation. Children learned of the shepherd who had once wandered the desert, who had touched the stars, and who had planted peace where war had once bloomed. They didn't memorize dates or battles. They learned values. Listen before you speak, grow before you conquer, protect before you lead. The axis tree continued to pulse, now surrounded by a constellation of smaller trees, each planted by someone who had been changed by Solara. These trees didn't just grow, they remembered. Touching their bark revealed visions, emotions, fragments of wisdom passed down from traveler to traveler. And deep within the heart of the original tree, Mike's essence remained. Not as a ghost, not as a god, but as a whisper, a presence, a guide. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, the leaves would rustle in patterns that felt like words. And those who listened closely swore they could hear him say, "Keep walking." And they did. Across stars, across centuries, across every corner of the cosmos. Because peace, once planted, never truly dies. It only grows. And so the galaxy moved forward, quietly, steadily, under the canopy of stars that had once watched Mike's journey unfold. The new axis tree, born from the hands of a child and the legacy of a shepherd, grew in harmony with the original. Its roots intertwined with the soil of Solara, and its branches reached toward distant systems, as if beckoning the universe to remember what had been learned. In time, the trees began to bloom with blossoms that shimmered like constellations. Each petal held memories, moments of kindness, of courage, of connection. When they fell, they drifted on the wind, carried across the city, across the world, and beyond. Travelers would catch them in their hands and feel something stir within, a forgotten dream, a long-lost hope, a sudden clarity. These petals became known as whispers, and they were treasured more than any gem or relic. Not because they were rare, but because they reminded everyone of what truly mattered. And though Mike's form had long since faded into the light, his presence remained.
In every act of compassion, in every seed planted, in every silence shared beneath the stars, the galaxy had not just been saved, it had been transformed. And in the quiet heart of Solara, where the wind rustled through the leaves of two great trees, the story of the shepherd lived on, not as a tale of one man's journey, but as a living truth. That peace is not the end of the story, it is the beginning. And the beginning never ended. The petals from the axis trees continued to drift across the galaxy, carried by solar winds and quantum currents, landing on ships, cities, and settlements. Wherever they touched, they awakened something: curiosity, compassion, memory. They were not magic. They were reminders, echoes of a man who had once walked alone and who had taught the stars to walk together. In time, the trees began to hum, not with sound, but with resonance, vibrations that aligned with the thoughts of those nearby. They became teachers, healers, companions. Some civilizations built their homes around them. Others carried their seeds to new worlds. And in every place they grew, the story of Mike grew with them, not as a myth, but as a method, a way of being. And though no statue bore his likeness and no monument carried his name, he was everywhere, in the way people greeted each other, in the way leaders listened before speaking, in the way children planted seeds with hope instead of fear. The galaxy had changed, not because of power, but because of presence. And in the quiet spaces between stars, where silence still reigned, the wind carried a whisper. Keep walking. Keep growing. Keep listening. And so they did. And so they did. Across nebulae and moons, across oceans of gas and rings of ice, the legacy of the shepherd continued to ripple outward. The petals of the axis trees seeded not just planets, but philosophies. They became part of rituals, of songs, of lullabies whispered to children born under unfamiliar stars. In time, entire civilizations traced their rebirth to a single story. A man who walked into the desert with a dog and a flock of sheep, and who returned as a whisper in the wind that taught the galaxy how to listen. The Nexus, once a mystery, became a companion. It no longer chose only the exceptional. It responded to the kind, the curious, the brave. It opened not to test, but to invite. And those who stepped through it no longer feared what lay beyond. They knew that somewhere, in the roots of every axis tree, in the silence between every heartbeat of the stars, the shepherd still walked, not to lead, not to rule, but to remind. That peace is not a destination, it is a path, and the path is never walked alone. And so they did. The petals continued to drift, the trees continued to hum, and the stars continued to sing. The galaxy, once fractured by fear and ambition, now pulsed with a quiet rhythm of unity. It wasn't perfect. There were still disagreements, still moments of tension, but the foundation had changed. The instinct to listen had replaced the impulse to dominate. In the far reaches of space, on a planet untouched by light for millennia, a single whisper petal landed. It shimmered against the dark soil, pulsed once, and sank into the ground. Days later, a sprout emerged, small, fragile, glowing faintly with memory. A traveler found it. She knelt beside it, touched its leaf, and felt the story of the shepherd unfold within her. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his face. But she knew his truth, and she carried it forward, one seed at a time, one kindness at a time, one step at a time. Because peace, once planted, never truly dies. It only grows. And so they did. The galaxy, once a scattered mosaic of conflict and isolation, had become a living tapestry of shared purpose. The teachings of the shepherd were no longer passed down as stories. They were embedded in the way people lived, the way they built, the way they dreamed. New axis trees bloomed on worlds that had never known peace. Their petals drifted through alien skies, carrying whispers of unity to species that had once feared the stars. And wherever a petal landed, a new beginning took root. In the heart of Solera, the original axis tree stood taller than ever, its branches now interwoven with the stars themselves. It had become a cosmic lighthouse, guiding travelers not to safety, but to understanding. And beneath it, where the soil glowed with memory, a single stone rested, smooth, unmarked, and warm to the touch. No name, no inscription, just presence. Those who touched it felt a quiet strength, a reminder that one soul, walking with purpose, could change the course of galaxies. And so they kept walking, and peace kept growing. And so they did. The galaxy, now a garden of stars and stories, continued to evolve, not through conquest or control, but through connection. The teachings of the shepherd became embedded in the architecture of civilizations. Cities were designed around trees, not towers. Councils met in circles, not chambers. And every new generation was taught not just history, but empathy. The Nexus, once a mysterious force, became a trusted companion. It opened only to those who approached with humility, and it revealed not power, but perspective. Those who passed through it returned, changed, not stronger but wiser. And in the quiet heart of Solara, the two axis trees stood side by side, their branches intertwined, their roots deep and wide. Beneath them, the stone that marked Mike's resting place remained untouched, yet always warm. Pilgrims came not to mourn, but to reflect. They sat in silence, listened to the wind, and left with lighter hearts. One day, a child born on a distant moon arrived in Solara. She had never heard of Mike. She had never seen the trees. But when she touched a whisper petal, she felt something stir. A memory not her own. A longing to understand. A desire to grow.
He was the first to walk the path you're now on.
And she walked it, as did others. And the path grew wider. And the stars, ever watchful, continued to sing, not of one man's journey, but of a galaxy that remembered how to listen, forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any future adventures. And if you want to support me directly, you can do so on Ko-fi. Every little contribution helps me keep creating amazing stories just like this. Thank you for being part of this journey.